Good morning. Welcome to the Point. As many of us are preparing for back to school, the state legislature is heading back to Lansing and the second half of the legislative season. We'll talk to two members about that and remember the life of a former state House member, state Senate member, and member of the U.S. House of Representatives. Congressman Brann passed away on Tuesday. Later in this show, more about his life and legacy. But first, Republican State Representative Tommy Brann is a freshman. We talked to him about his first few months in office and what he'd like to get accomplished in the rest of the year. Representative, it was about a year ago that you had just won your primary race. You were getting ready for the general election. Now, let's fast forward 12 months or a little more. And you've already seen some of your first legislation signed. You have more bills introduced. You've been in Lansing, back and forth, of course, for a half a year. Before we start talking about some of the details, some of the things that you wanted to get done, what do you know about being a state representative now that you didn't know when we sat down here and talked last year?
Well, I know it's a lot of good people down there, both sides. We don't fight, and a lot of bills are voted unanimously, which surprised me. I know I was nervous my first day. I mean, I'm human. We had to, first day we had to say our seat number, and I thought, well, that shouldn't be too hard. But I put C on there, so I said Mr. Clerk and not Mr. Speaker. So I just don't want to let my constituents down. So I know I was a little bit nervous, but I got the swig of it, and my constituents didn't pay me to, on a job training. So I'm learning fast and doing a good job, I think.
One of the things you talked about, I know this is still something that you're interested in, and it was unique as an issue, and that is free enterprise and getting free enterprise to be taught in school. In fact, you have a curriculum that you developed. And this isn't about a profit motive for you. This is about teaching kids a little bit about the real world of business, something that you, just only 46 years you've had your own business, which is pretty remarkable given the somewhat fickle nature of the food industry sometimes.
It's a tough business. Yeah, I've been there 46 years on division, and free enterprise is, to me, the best system in the world. I mean, it lifted 100 million Chinese out of poverty. Free enterprise did. My curriculum was at Godfrey Lee, Team 21. We did a survey before and after, and the kids reacted so positively towards it, and so many more kids wanted to be their own business person, which they can. I mean, you don't have to go to college to be a business person. People started in garages. They started, like Nike, Phil Knight started selling tennis shoes out of his trunk. So, I mean, you can do it, and I want to give these kids hope. And it gives them a business plan, how to do it, and what to do. I mean, Dr. Dre, he sold his headphones for $800 million to Apple. So, I mean, it can be done.
One of the bills that you did get passed had to do with something kind of specific, but it's the juxtaposition of where a bar restaurant may be located next to a school or a church. Without getting into the complexities of it, it was really a matter of grandfathering in agreements that had been made so somebody who was in that pre-existing condition wasn't forced to move their business.
Yeah, it simply saved a lot of jobs because a church was suing a bar, and they already had agreements, so it grandfathered in. It was an important bill. It's not why I ran, but it was an important bill, and my first one I got signed, but I really didn't. I got other things I want to do, really.
But there is also kind of that issue-driven thing that lands on your front door too. I mean, there are issues that you haven't necessarily planned to champion or even introduce bills about, but when a constituent or somebody brings them to you, then that's part of the job too.
It is, and I love that part of the job. But like homelessness, I didn't really go to Lansing to address homelessness, but this is a great state and great country, and really shouldn't have homelessness. And I got a bill that if you're a landlord, that you will get a tax break if you lower your rent to $500, a Michigan tax break. There's a $5 million cap, so it's experimental, but I'm going to drop that bill and try to get that through committee.
And one of that is really about access to housing, because the housing market, if you have a house for sale in a certain price range particularly, it's a seller's market out there. Inventories are low, so that means in addition to house prices being up a little bit, even though they may have fallen off a little in August, we don't know yet, we'll have to wait for the rest of the month, but that means rent prices are up too. So if somebody caps their rent at $500, that would be a considerable savings, and it could be the difference between somebody having someplace to live and not.
Right, like a woman with 2 kids, they're a simple thing like their car breaking down, they lose their job. I mean, to us maybe that's simple. It's not simple to them. That's a tragedy. And in that they can't afford, they lose their home and they can't afford their payments. So this brings that payment down to them. So I really believe in it.
And again, this is a bill that you have introduced.
Right.
And so there are a number of other things that you've worked on. One of them that I found kind of interesting, and you said you would explain it, so I'll ask you to, and that is about raising the legal age for smoking or to buy tobacco products to 21 years old. Now, that's a little counterintuitive with the push to put everything at 18 years old, which has been kind of universal. One time alcohol was even 18 years old. We moved back to 21 in most states, or in many states at least. Give me your reasoning behind it.
Sure. First of all, I'm a bar owner, so I remember the 18-year-old drinkers, and it was good business for me, but it was the wrong business, really. The 21 is a good law. I mean, there's 16,200 people a year die in Michigan because of smoking diseases, and 1.1 billion we spend on Medicaid. So you look at the conservatism. If you want to be conservative, that's that frugal, saving taxpayers' dollars. But my main thing is saving lives. I mean, 21-year-olds, if it's raised to 21 years old, the 15 to 16-year-olds will starting to smoke, and that would stop them or at least prohibit them from smoking. And 21-year-olds don't hang around 15-year-olds, so it's going to be harder for them to get cigarettes. I mean, I have a lot of resources like we all do, and I talked to my doctor about it, and he says that 15 to 16-year-olds are ones that are really starting to smoke now, and it's just so many bad things happen, and I know, the word freedom is a big word, and it should be a big word, but I look at freedom maybe to live longer. I mean, I look at that type of freedom too. And when I took that oath, you're supposed to protect the health of Michigan and citizens of Michigan. To me, this is upholding the oath.
The idea that this is both Republicans and Democrats goes back to something that you said at the beginning of this conversation, and that was that you work together with people that are Republicans and Democrats.
Sure.
There isn't the kind of fighting that is sometimes portrayed, and that many bills are passed unanimously. I think some of the FOIA rules, which were some of the first bills that were passed out of the House this year, were very high in both Republican and Democrat votes. So this is kind of an example of that. Was that a bit of a surprise? Because I think very often guys like me talk about the differences between Republicans and Democrats without pointing out that many things don't have partisan labels on them.
It was. It was a great surprise. I'm on one of the first bills I co-sponsored myself was the Brinks bill, which was really cool. To me, it was an honor to do that. But my seat is right next to the Democrats. Our speaker put me there. And I'm fine. I mean, I like it. I mean, it's just all 110 people. There are good people there that really care about the state of Michigan. And we might have a few differences, but I don't see a lot of it.
There is also more of the, as I explained it, the government closest to you has the most impact on you. So, say versus a federal legislator, a state legislator has things that impact much closer to home, and I might extrapolate that to your county commission or city commission. But
sure.
One of the things that you have an interest in would be that larger overarching idea that would apply to all Michiganders about animal cruelty, and you have legislation that you've introduced about that.
Well, yeah, my restaurant, again, it's such a good part of me, and I take it to Lansing, and it's a blue-collar restaurant. And booth number 99, about 25 years ago, 3 girls were sitting there, and I was busting the table near it, and they said the way to get even with somebody, revenge on them, is to kill their dog. And I said, I can't believe that what I was hearing. And cruelty to animals is a big thing. My House Bill 4332 and 4333, 32 makes an animal a companion and a loved one, and 3 ups the punishment. 100% of sexual offenders have some sort of animal abuse history, and that Virginia State Trooper that got killed 3 months ago, the person that killed him, I was looking on 15 different things he did wrong. One was cruelty to animals. We should take that seriously.
When you put these bills together and take us a little bit behind the scenes,
sure.
Obviously there's legislative staff that is there to help you out. You put these together. How do you communicate these kind of ideas? And I brought all of these up because I think they're all kind of broad ranging. They cover a lot of different areas. Is it then kind of a sales job? Do you go out and start talking to your fellow members and say, look, here's something I'm trying to do. This is why I want to do it. And is that how this process goes?
It does. If you ever come to my office, I don't sit behind that big. I put business cards on that big desk. I can't sit. That's too much. But on my round table, I have a piece of yellow page just like you do there, and it says practice rejection because you do have to be ready for rejection. And it does hurt. You know, I'm a human being. It does hurt when somebody says, no, I can't really co-sponsor that. A few of my libertarian friends, I'm a big James Bond fan. I'm starting to call them Dr. No. Every time I come to them, they're like a James Bond character. Everything's no. So you do have to handle rejection. But, you know, that's what my job is, and I accept that. I own a bar, so I'm used to rejection.
When we come back, State Representative Winnie Brinks, a Democrat from Grand Rapids, talks to us about what's on her agenda. To the Point. Welcome back to the Point. State Representative Winnie Brinks is a Democrat who has been serving in Lansing for some years. We talked to her about some of what she would like to accomplish as the legislature heads back to work. Representative, let's talk about something. You and I have had this conversation a lot, and I've been following it for a number of years as well, doing stories about the Grand Rapids Home for Veterans. Recently, the Auditor General's office in the state of Michigan came back with findings, a subsequent report to one they did in 2016. And in it, they said, I'll categorize it. You can then tell me what your take is. There were a couple of areas where the home had come up to what they thought was compliance, a couple of other areas where there was substantial compliance. But one of the real troubling areas I know for you has been the staffing at the home.
That's right.
And even though this was in what would be the margin of error for most reports, because it is so critical that staffing is done right, they still said, look, you've got to get better. I think they were at 97 percentile, something like that. But that's still 3% when they're understaffed. And I know you had a reaction to that.
Yeah, you know, I'm still very concerned about the staffing levels there. You mentioned the 97% that would be for the direct care staff, the frontline staff taking care of the residents. So obviously that 3% is very important. But they also had a much more severe number for the supervisors. That was about 59%. And so, you know, the department is saying, well, we don't need as many as we thought we needed, but still, you know, I mean, that's a really huge gap there between 59% and 100% for supervision. And we found that was where there was a lot of gaps in terms of the transition of the staff before, and I think that was in part responsible for some of the abuse and neglect that happened. Was there was not proper supervision. So I'm very concerned about that. I'll continue to watch that and monitor that, and I do think that it's just really incumbent upon us as a legislature to keep our eye on what's going on there at the home. We can't just assume that all of a sudden now, since you know we've got a new contractor in there, that everything's just hunky-dory. There's still a lot of room for improvement.
When you look at some of the plans, and I don't know exactly where we are, I know that the legislature acted on some plans that would rebuild a home in Grand Rapids, smaller facility, if I understand it, create another home in southeast Michigan, because many of the residents in Grand Rapids, I'm told, have family in the southeast side because there is no facility. Right now there's just two. There's one here and one in Marquette. Given all of that, first of all, where are we in that process? Is that going forward? And do you see that as something that is potentially positive?
Yeah, I think it is potentially positive. I think in some ways having smaller homes more evenly scattered throughout the state is a better model in terms of serving residents in their home communities. So I like that part of the plan. There still needs to be the money that comes through. We're counting on some federal dollars to come through to help pay for that, and I think that that's still in progress. So I'm excited about the potential there, but still have some concerns to make sure that that will all actually come together. In the meantime, there's a lot of insecurity at the home among the residents there, wondering what's going to happen, where they're going to be. If we're going to have fewer residents here in Grand Rapids, does that mean some of them have to leave? So those are the kinds of concerns I hear from them, and I think we can address those. But the important thing to me will be that all those pieces come together and that we still are able to serve as many residents as we have been able to historically, wherever that is in the state.
One of the things you mentioned was some federal dollars, and I always try to explain this when we have a longer form conversation, because many people, I think, have the misconception that these are somehow part of the Veterans Administration, and they are not. These are state-run operated homes. You do get some federal money, but this is a function of the state, not the Veterans Administration.
Yeah, absolutely. This is not part of what people normally call the VA. However, there are federal dollars available to do services for veterans, and we're hoping to combine that with the state dollars to do the work to create the structures that we need to finish the authority model and to put those homes throughout the state.
Let's shift gears a little bit, but it still has to do with taking care of people. And you've been talking about something called a health care Bill of Rights. And health care is one of a number of hot button issues that are currently being discussed on a national level. Tell me what the health care Bill of Rights looks like from this level.
Yeah, so my priority when we started talking about healthcare earlier this year and watching what was happening in Washington, D.C. with the Trump administration and their efforts to repeal Obamacare and the ACA, my priority was to try to retain some of the benefits that people really have appreciated about the ACA. And obviously the ACA is not perfect. We need to find ways to fix some of the issues there, particularly with affordability for certain folks. But there are lots of things that they really have appreciated and have literally saved lives. So some things like covering pre-existing conditions, making sure that there are essential health benefits included with each plan so that people can always get prenatal care, they can always get preventive services for their children. Essential services like drugs, pharmaceutical drugs are covered in every plan. So some of those things I think are vital elements to solid health plans, no matter who's offering them, whether it's through the ACA or through the state exchanges. So we are working at the state level to try and put that Bill of Rights in place so that people can be guaranteed access to high quality, affordable health care.
All of that, even if it goes through, would become likely dependent on what happens in Washington to some degree.
Right.
One of the biggest concerns for many people in Michigan is the fact that we're one of those states that said yes when it came to Medicaid expansion, and there was the promise of federal backup for that at least for a while, and no matter what happens, some of that money is going to start going away.
Right.
Perhaps wholesale if there's some big change, but in any event, it was always scheduled to be ratcheted back a bit, which means more of a burden on the state when it comes to paying for that. Mm-hmm. Are we prepared to do that in the state?
You know, we're not prepared to do that. We would need to take a look at where all of the dollars are going in our budget and really find a way to prioritize that. And I would say that that's one of the most important things that we've done in my time in the legislature. I think we took that vote my first term to expand Medicaid coverage to folks that are working but still do not have that coverage. So either their employer doesn't offer it or it's just astronomically expensive. So if you're eligible to purchase your care or get Medicaid, not purchase, but get Medicaid, even though you're low income, that's really been helpful to us as communities in terms of lowering out-of-pocket costs for other people who end up paying for the health care that people who are uninsured get. So fewer emergency room visits and getting more preventive care and more services that help people with chronic illnesses is keeping the health care rates in the private market lower than they would be if we did not have that. And
that Medicaid expansion includes a lot of people here in the state of Michigan. I mean, it's not an insignificant number.
Right. It's about 760,000 people who now have health care coverage, and that provides a lot of security for families. So if you know that you've got that health insurance there and that's one bill you're not going to have to worry about, that makes a huge difference in terms of your ability to, get your kids to school, stay healthy, get to work, do the things that all the families in our community need to rely on each other to get done.
In the couple of minutes that we have left, you said just before we sat down, we ought to talk about it for you. And it's interesting because it almost seems like ancient history, though it's only been about 6 or 7 months.
Right.
Over in the House, Republicans, Democrats, almost unanimous, passed Freedom of Information Act expansion that would include the legislature, the governor, and a number of other things within the state. Second time you've done that because you passed it in the last session too. They've gone over to the Senate and nothing has happened, and from what I gather from some leadership, nothing is likely to happen. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that's an accurate assessment, and it's really unfortunate because when I talk with folks out in the community, that's one thing that they really feel is unfair. You know, local governments, county commissions, city commissions, they have managed to carry out their business, and they're subject to the rules of FOIA. It's all about responsibility and accountability and transparency to the people that we actually serve, our constituents. That's who's most important. And so if we are unable to, operate in a transparent manner, they don't like that. So I think it's really important for us to take that up, and it was incredibly bipartisan, almost unanimous through the House twice, and so I think that the Senate choosing to not take this up is a real travesty for the people.
Up next, a look back at the life of Congressman Brann, his public service, and what it means to West Michigan. That's next. To the point. The news that Congressman Brann passed away last Tuesday had many of us reflecting on his time as a public servant. We took a look back at some of what Congressman Ehlers accomplished. Brann was a constant figure in West Michigan and national politics for decades, from the Kent County Board of Commissioners to the Michigan State House and Senate to the U.S. House of Representatives. Brann was someone that voters repeatedly chose to represent them on numerous fronts. His background as a nuclear physicist and college professor carried over into his public service, using his knowledge and teaching skills to explain complex issues to those he represented. While in Congress, he chaired the STEM Education Caucus, then an idea that was new to many, now a plan that is being championed in most educational arenas to increase learning in science, technology, engineering, and math. Ehlers' efforts to get a more equitable share of transportation funding back to Michigan was a mainstay of his tenure in Washington. As a reminder, the new train terminal in Grand Rapids was named for the former congressman in 2014. Another of Ehlers' passions was taking care of the Great Lakes, from making sure the water stayed pure to making sure it stayed here rather than being shipped to parched southwestern states. And even then, now more than 7 years ago, when we talked with him on To the Point, Congressman Ehlers had already been fighting the issue of Asian carp for years. The normally mild-mannered Ehlers was animated when fighting to keep money in the budget to take care of the carp issue, and voiced his displeasure when one Corps of Engineers official had temporarily omitted the funds.
Especially government employees. But that was nonsense. Now, that was about 7 years ago, and very little has happened. I keep beating on it, on this issue. My colleagues have helped me a lot, and now they're behind me 500%. They're just really eager to stop the carp, but it should have happened long ago.
Lesser known, perhaps, was Congressman Ehlers' involvement in bringing the U.S. House into the information age, working on the House Administration Committee to bring the Internet to Capitol Hill offices, and helping create a website for the Library of Congress that allows anyone to look up legislation that Congress is working on. One of his contemporaries, former Congressman Pete Hoekstra, talked about how his colleague approached his job as a United States representative.
And Vern had a deep respect for the history of that district, the district that gave us Gerald Ford, the district that gave us Paul Henry. And he recognized that not only did he have a responsibility to the constituents that he served while he was in Congress, but the responsibility to that district over a period of 20 to 30 years. He felt that, and regardless of what was going on in Washington, I think he and I were both very, very focused on who we worked for and the values of the people that we represented, and we tried to take that to Washington regardless of how Washington was going.
Ehlers retired in 2011 after 17 years in the House. Services for Congressman Ehlers will be later this week. You can find a link on our website at woodtv.com. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. To the Point.